Hello Dub Nation, it's always a thrill to connect with you, especially as we're about to reveal the latest news that could shape the fate of our beloved Golden State Warriors. But before we dive into this whirlwind of information, let me make a friendly request. Show us some love by clicking the like button to strengthen our bond, and hey, if you are not subscribed yet, join our channel for a thrilling and emotional journey. Don't forget to turn on notifications to stay ahead of the game.
The Warriors are facing an unavoidable Stephen Curry problem for the rest of the season. The Golden State Warriors may have delivered their most thrilling win of the season last night, grinding out a gutsy victory over the Phoenix Suns. But beneath the excitement lies a growing concern the franchise can no longer ignore: Stephen Curry's health, and how much they can realistically ask from their 37-year-old superstar. With Curry sidelined due to a lingering knee issue, guard Pat Spencer stepped into the spotlight and delivered a performance few will forget anytime soon. Spencer poured in a career-high 20 points and knocked down 6 of his 11 attempts from beyond the arc, helping fuel a comeback that reminded everyone the Warriors still have fight left in them. It was the kind of performance that didn't feel accidental. Spencer has quietly built a reputation for being ready whenever his number is called, and now Golden State may need that reliability more than ever. If Curry continues to battle a chronic knee problem, the Warriors simply cannot afford to push their two-time MVP beyond his limits, especially if the returns don't justify the risk. Managing Curry is no longer optional. The Warriors find themselves in an unusual position. They are still alive in the play-in race, and this win proved they can compete with strong opponents like Phoenix. Yes, the Suns were missing Devin Booker, but that shouldn't overshadow Golden State's resilience or the poise they showed during a late-game surge, one that might not have been possible without Spencer setting the tone early. Meanwhile, Golden State's trade deadline moves have quietly opened the door for Spencer to be converted from a two-way contract to a standard NBA deal. That would mark a major milestone for the 29-year-old, even if he downplayed the significance after the game. There's no question the Warriors need Curry on the floor if they want any real shot at surviving the play-in, let alone making a higher-seeded playoff team uncomfortable in the first round. But even with the addition of Kristaps Porzingis at the deadline, it still feels unlikely that Golden State has enough firepower to mount a truly deep postseason run. So the question becomes unavoidable. What is the benefit of having Curry play through pain if the ceiling for this team may already be limited? The bigger picture matters. The Warriors must balance two competing realities, staying competitive now while protecting their future. That puts head coach Steve Kerr in a delicate position. Every decision about Curry's minutes from this point forward could ripple into next season. Curry has endured his share of injuries in recent years, and the last thing Golden State can risk is a serious setback that compromises their chances of being a legitimate contender next season. Overworking a franchise icon this late in his career would be a gamble with enormous consequences. The smarter path may be clear, even if it isn't popular inside the locker room. Kerr should strongly consider expanding Spencer's role and giving Curry more opportunities to rest. Preserving the energy of a generational talent is far more valuable than chasing short-term gains, especially if this roster's most realistic outcome is a first-round exit. A fierce competitor like Curry will never welcome the idea of playing less. That's simply not who he is. But leadership sometimes means protecting a player from his own relentless drive. If the Warriors want to remain relevant beyond this season, they must think long-term. And that likely means trusting Spencer more, easing Curry's workload, and making responsible choices that safeguard both their superstar and the franchise's future. Internally, this is the kind of moment that often reshapes a team's identity. For years, the Warriors' formula has been simple. When in doubt, trust Curry to carry the offense and deliver in the biggest moments. But time is undefeated, and even the greatest shooters in NBA history cannot outrun the physical toll of nearly 2 decades at the highest level. Golden State is beginning to confront a reality many contenders eventually face: the transition from dependence on a single superstar to a more balanced structure. Spencer's emergence could not have come at a better time, not just as a temporary solution, but as a symbol of the depth the Warriors must cultivate if they want to extend their competitive window. Around the league, executives and analysts are watching closely. How the Warriors handle Curry over the next several months could influence everything from off-season planning to potential roster moves. Rival teams understand that a healthier Curry next season is far more dangerous than an exhausted one scraping through April. There is also a psychological component to consider. When role players see opportunity, energy shifts inside a locker room. Spencer's breakout performance sends a message that contributions can come from anywhere, and that belief often fuels the kind of late-season surges teams need just to stay alive. At the same time, the Western Conference remains unforgiving. Every game carries weight, and the margin for error is razor-thin. One losing streak could erase the progress Golden State fought so hard to build, which only increases the temptation to lean heavily on Curry whenever he is available. That is where discipline must override urgency. Steve Kerr has long been praised for his ability to see beyond the next game, and this stretch may test that philosophy more than ever. Protecting Curry does not mean surrendering the season. It means being strategic enough to ensure that when he does step onto the floor, he can still be the player defenses fear most. Another important ripple effect involves the Warriors' younger core. Increased minutes for supporting guards create valuable evaluation time for the front office. These games are no longer just about chasing wins. They are auditions that will help determine who fits into Golden State's long-term blueprint. And then there is the fan perspective. Chase Center has been spoiled by brilliance for over a decade, witnessing nightly reminders of Curry's transformative impact on the sport. The idea of scaling back his workload may feel uncomfortable, even unfamiliar, but it also signals organizational maturity. The understanding that sustained success often requires patience. If Golden State manages this correctly, the benefits could extend well beyond this season. A rested Curry entering next year with a reinforced roster is a far more convincing foundation for another deep run than a worn-down star recovering from preventable setbacks. The Warriors are not just fighting for a play-in spot anymore. They are quietly fighting against time, expectations, and the natural evolution of a dynasty that refuses to fade easily. For now, the path forward demands clarity. Maximize Curry when it matters most, trust the players stepping into larger roles, and resist the short-term pressure that has derailed so many veteran teams before them. Because the truth is becoming harder to ignore, the Warriors' championship hopes, both present and future, may depend less on how often Stephen Curry plays and more on how wisely they choose their moments. Steph Curry may be headed toward a familiar fate. After the Warriors' trade deadline, another early playoff exit is beginning to feel less like a possibility and more like a looming reality for the Golden State Warriors. When the franchise brought Jimmy Butler in last season, the message was clear. Maximize the championship window while Stephen Curry is still playing at an elite level. Golden State wasn't just thinking about competing, they were thinking about banners. And as this year's trade deadline approached, the front office appeared ready to swing even bigger. For a moment, it looked like the Warriors were preparing a blockbuster pursuit of Giannis Antetokounmpo, a move that could have completely reshaped the league and instantly elevated Golden State back into the inner circle of true contenders. But once it became evident that the Milwaukee Bucks had no real intention of parting with their superstar, the Warriors pivoted. Instead, they landed Kristaps Porzingis. A talented player? Absolutely. The transformational acquisition fans were dreaming about? Not quite. That gap between expectation and reality is now shaping how this season is being viewed. A difficult road taking shape. It is becoming increasingly clear that Golden State may consider itself fortunate just to escape the first round, and that's assuming they make it through the play-in tournament at all. The Warriors currently sit 8th in the conference, 4 games behind 6th-place Minnesota and comfortably ahead of the teams chasing from below. The standings offer some breathing room, but not security. If the season ended today, Golden State would face the 7th-seeded Phoenix Suns in the play-in. A win would lock them into the 7th seed and likely set up a first-round series against the 2nd-seeded Spurs. A loss would mean one more high-pressure game for the 8th spot, potentially followed by a daunting matchup with the Thunder. None of these paths are easy. Yes, the Warriors proved last year they can still surprise people, knocking off the higher-seeded Rockets in the opening round. And while San Antonio remains relatively young in postseason experience, a team anchored by Victor Wembanyama presents an entirely different level of challenge, one that demands near-perfect basketball. And perfection is a heavy burden to place on a 37-year-old superstar. You can never fully count out Stephen Curry, not as long as he's healthy. His presence alone changes defensive schemes, tempo, and belief inside a locker room. But asking him to drag this roster through 4 playoff rounds feels increasingly unrealistic. The recent track record only reinforces that concern. Since capturing the championship in 2022, the Warriors have failed to advance past the second round twice and missed the playoffs entirely in 2024. For a franchise accustomed to dominance, that trend is impossible to ignore. Are the Warriors drifting toward the very future they fear? Porzingis could still become a difference maker, especially in a playoff setting where size and floor spacing matter more than ever. If he regains full health and rhythm, his versatility could unlock new offensive dimensions for Golden State. But that "if" carries significant weight. He appeared in just 17 games during the early months of the season with Atlanta after playing 42 games for Boston last year. Now sidelined with Achilles tendonitis, his availability remains one of the biggest unanswered questions hovering over the Warriors' postseason hopes. Golden State acquired impact, but not certainty. To be fair, even a hypothetical trade for Giannis might have come with similar short-term concerns, as he is also dealing with his second calf injury of the season. The difference, of course, is that Giannis changes a franchise's trajectory overnight. For now, the Warriors can only hope Porzingis gets on the court soon enough and stays there long enough to help elevate the team when it matters most. The clock is getting louder. When summer arrives, don't be surprised if Golden State revisits its pursuit of a true co-star for Curry. The dream of pairing him with another generational force hasn't faded. By then, Curry will be 38, and every offseason will feel increasingly urgent. That is the quiet tension surrounding this organization, balancing belief in what Curry can still do with the undeniable passage of time. Warriors fans will continue to hope for postseason magic because Curry has built a career on defying logic, but hope alone rarely carries a team through the modern Western Conference. Golden State is approaching a crossroads, one where ambition, roster reality, and the limits of longevity are beginning to collide. And unless something shifts dramatically, the Warriors risk finding themselves in the exact situation they have worked so hard to avoid, relying on brilliance that is still breathtaking but no longer enough by itself to guarantee a path back to the finals. There is also a broader organizational question beginning to surface, one that goes beyond this season and even beyond the next roster move. How long can a franchise successfully build around a legend without accelerating the transition to its next era? The Warriors are not rebuilding, but they are no longer operating from the same position of dominance that defined their dynasty years. The league has gotten younger, faster, and deeper. Teams like Oklahoma City and San Antonio are structured for long-term success, while others continue stacking talent through aggressive trades and draft capital. Golden State, meanwhile, is trying to extend a championship window that naturally narrows with each passing season. Inside the front office, urgency is likely growing. Every remaining prime year of Curry's career carries enormous value, not just competitively, but culturally and financially. He is still the face of the franchise, still the engine behind sold-out arenas, national broadcasts, and the global identity the Warriors have built over the past decade. But emotional loyalty and strategic clarity do not always align easily. At some point, difficult basketball decisions must be made. Should they prioritize durability over star power, or should they begin quietly preparing for a roster evolution that keeps them competitive after Curry eventually steps away? Those questions don't require immediate answers, but the pressure to define a direction is increasing. Another ripple effect is already being felt in how opponents approach Golden State. Teams no longer view the Warriors with the same automatic intimidation that once followed them into every arena. There is still deep respect, especially for Curry, but there is also a growing sense that this team is beatable in a 7-game series. That psychological shift matters more than it may seem. Championship teams often carry an aura that wins games before they even begin. Re-establishing that presence typically requires either overwhelming talent or dominant consistency, two areas where Golden State has struggled to separate itself recently. Still, writing off a Curry-led team has always been dangerous. Few players in league history have demonstrated a greater ability to alter the trajectory of a postseason with a single explosive stretch. One unforgettable series can rewrite narratives overnight. Yet relying on extraordinary moments is very different from building sustainable superiority. The Warriors' margin for error is thinner now. They likely need near-ideal health, immediate chemistry with Porzingis, defensive discipline, and timely scoring from their supporting cast just to position themselves as a legitimate threat. That is a long list of variables for any contender, especially one navigating the physical realities of an aging core. What happens next could define the final chapter of the Curry era. If Golden State manages to outperform expectations, the season could become a testament to resilience and elite leadership. But if the playoffs end quickly again, the noise surrounding the team will grow louder. Questions about roster construction, long-term planning, and whether the organization moved aggressively enough while its superstar was still capable of carrying the heaviest load. For now, the Warriors remain suspended between past glory and future uncertainty. They are experienced enough to know that championship windows rarely close all at once. More often, they narrow quietly, until one day the path that once looked so familiar is no longer there. And as the postseason approaches, one truth is becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The outcome of this year may not just shape the Warriors' immediate future. It could determine how the Stephen Curry era is ultimately remembered. Former Warriors champions reach a breaking point. After the trade deadline, for years, they were part of a dynasty. Players who helped define one of the most dominant eras in modern basketball. Today, however, several former Golden State Warriors champions find themselves facing an uncomfortable reality. The trade deadline has passed, and with it, any immediate chance of a fresh start. After missing out on a blockbuster pursuit of Giannis Antetokounmpo, the Warriors weren't the only organization left dealing with disappointment. Around the league, three familiar names, Klay Thompson, Jordan Poole, and Kevon Looney, are now stuck in situations that feel increasingly uncertain, if not outright troubling. Different teams, different expectations, same underlying frustration. Former Warriors, unexpected circumstances. Klay Thompson's name had been circulating in trade rumors since the opening months of the season. A slow individual start and a surprising move to the bench, the first time he had taken on such a role since leaving Golden State to join the Dallas Mavericks in the 2024 offseason, raised questions about his long-term fit. To his credit, Thompson showed signs of life in January, gradually improving his production even as consistency remained elusive. Still, scoring in double figures in just one of his last 6 games is not the standard typically associated with a 5-time All-Star whose reputation was built on reliability in big moments. Dallas ultimately chose stability over change, keeping Thompson through the deadline. Yet the franchise also moved veteran Anthony Davis in a trade with the Washington Wizards that delivered limited immediate return, a decision that signaled something deeper than a simple roster adjustment. It hinted at a reset. With Davis gone, the Mavericks appear far less likely to rush Kyrie Irving back from his ACL recovery. Instead, the organization seems prepared to lean into a longer-term vision centered on #1 overall pick Cooper Flagg. Patience has replaced urgency. And that may not be what Thompson envisioned when he arrived in Dallas hoping to be the missing piece for a team that had just fallen short in the 2024 NBA Finals against Boston. For a competitor who spent over a decade chasing titles, the emotional adjustment to a transitional roster cannot be easy. At least Thompson is playing. As frustrating as Thompson's situation may feel, there is one important distinction. He is still on the court. The same cannot currently be said for Jordan Poole or Kevin Looney in New Orleans. Poole, now earning close to $32 million this season, has shockingly gone 6 consecutive games without seeing the floor. That absence speaks volumes for a Pelicans team struggling to stay afloat with a 13-40 record and sitting near the bottom of the Western Conference. New Orleans reportedly explored moving Poole before the deadline, but the market never materialized. A reminder of how quickly perception can shift in the NBA when production fails to match a contract. Now the questions grow louder. Will Poole get another real opportunity once the season progresses? Can he rebuild his value? And perhaps most importantly, what team is prepared to absorb the roughly $34 million still owed to him next year? Uncertainty has become the defining theme of his season. Looney's situation is quieter but no less concerning. Since signing a 2-year $16 million deal with the Pelicans, he has largely lived on the edges of the rotation. What was once considered dependable interior presence has turned into sporadic usage and limited impact. With an $8 million team option looming, one the franchise is widely expected to decline, the 3-time champion is suddenly confronting a question few would have predicted not long ago. What does the next chapter of his NBA career look like? The harsh reality of life. After a dynasty, the NBA moves fast. Roles change, windows close. Yesterday's core pieces can quickly become today's uncertainties. There is something undeniably sobering about watching players who once thrived under the brightest lights now searching for stability elsewhere. It underscores just how rare and fragile championship ecosystems truly are. Chemistry, timing, health, leadership. When those elements align, dynasties are born. When they scatter, even proven winners can struggle to rediscover their footing. Adding to the emotional weight across the league is the devastating ACL injury to Jimmy Butler, which effectively derailed Golden State's season and reshaped the competitive landscape. But while the Warriors grapple with their own setback, it is equally difficult to ignore the challenges facing several of the franchise's former pillars. Basketball careers rarely follow a straight path, and reinvention is often demanded without warning. For Thompson, Poole, and Looney, the months ahead may define far more than just this season. They represent a test of resilience, a chance to adapt, to reclaim relevance, and to prove that championship DNA does not simply fade with changing uniforms. Because in a league built on constant evolution, the difference between decline and revival often comes down to one thing: opportunity. And right now, all three are still waiting for theirs. What makes these situations even more striking is how recently all three players were competing on basketball's biggest stage. Not long ago, they were operating within a structure that maximized their strengths, a system built on movement, spacing, trust, and championship expectations. Outside of that environment, the margin for error has proven much smaller. For Thompson, the challenge is as much mental as it is physical. Few shooters in league history have commanded the defensive attention he once did automatically. Now, every quiet scoring night invites louder questions about decline, role acceptance, and longevity. Around the league, executives often watch veterans in these moments with a single question in mind. Can this player still shift a playoff game? The answer will likely determine how the rest of Thompson's career unfolds. Dallas, meanwhile, appears to be prioritizing flexibility and youth, a strategy that typically comes with growing pains. If the Mavericks lean fully into development, Thompson could find himself in a strange dual role, expected veteran presence, but no longer a central pillar. That type of transition is rarely easy for players who have spent their careers being relied upon when the stakes were highest. Jordan Poole's path may be even more unpredictable. There was a time when his confidence bordered on electric, the kind of scorer capable of changing momentum in minutes. But confidence in the NBA is fragile, and extended stretches outside the rotation can quietly erode a player's rhythm. For Poole, the remainder of the season may become less about team success and more about professional survival. League insiders know that high-scoring guards tend to get second chances, especially those still in their mid-20s. It would not be surprising to see teams with rebuilding timelines monitor his situation closely, viewing him as a potential reclamation project if circumstances shift in the offseason. Kevin Looney faces a different battle, one that many traditional big men eventually encounter as the league continues to evolve towards speed and versatility. Looney built his reputation on positioning, rebounding, and defensive discipline rather than highlight plays. Players with that profile often depend heavily on system fit, and without it, their impact can become easier to overlook. Still, front offices never forget playoff reliability. One strong postseason run earlier in a career can extend opportunities longer than expected. Whether Looney receives that chance again may depend on injuries, roster needs, and the constant reshuffling that defines modern rotations. Beyond the individual stories, there is a broader lesson unfolding about the life cycle of championship teams. Keeping a title core together is extraordinarily difficult, but replacing it can be even harder. Every dynasty eventually fragments, sending its former contributors across the league, some to larger roles, others into uncertainty. Golden State itself is living proof of how quickly the landscape can change. The organization that once set the standard for continuity is now watching parts of its championship fabric scattered across multiple franchises, each thread trying to hold on in a different way. Yet the NBA has always been a league of reinvention. Careers have been revived after quieter seasons. Veterans have rediscovered purpose on contenders. Former stars have reshaped their identities and extended their playing days by embracing change rather than resisting it. That possibility still exists for all three players. But the next phase will demand patience, and perhaps more importantly, self-awareness. Accepting a reduced role, adapting to new expectations, or even becoming a mentor can prolong relevance in ways raw production sometimes cannot. As the league moves closer to the postseason, these storylines may not dominate headlines, but they are being noticed in front offices everywhere. Teams constantly search for experienced players who understand playoff pressure, and history suggests that reputations built during championship runs rarely disappear entirely. For now, however, the reality is unavoidable. The trade deadline has locked many doors, and the immediate future offers limited control. What happens next will depend on preparation meeting the next opportunity, whenever it arrives. Because if the rise of a dynasty teaches anything, it is that success is rarely permanent. And if its aftermath teaches something equally important, it is that resilience often defines how the story continues long after the banners are raised.